DSN Week with Alan Mazer.
A test of maturity. A new generation of Ukrainians took to the streets to defend anti-corruption bodies, leaving social media behind. The authorities listened. But will they be able to gather parliament again? We're talking now about the 7 days when Russians were expecting new Maidans in Ukraine. This is TSN Week. The more you know, the better prepared you are. Greetings to everyone watching us on our YouTube channel as well. And coming up in the broadcast, all efforts on Pokrovsk.
Oops, and a hallucination.
Why does Putin want Pokrovsk? Why has the defense of the city become a turning point in the war?
You could say the termite saved my life.
And can the armed forces of Ukraine disrupt the Russian summer offensive with the 50 days gifted by Trump? The anti-corruption pitfalls.
What surprised me wasn't even what they decided, but how they did it.
Why did the law on Nabu and SAP, which no one had read, blow up like that? And will it be possible to fix the glitch in the system that it left behind? This week on the front, we've had a significant success in the Sumy region, reports our war correspondent Andriy Tsaplienko. The 225th Separate Assault Regiment has liberated Kindertivka in the Sumy region. The occupiers have lost 3 battalions, which is about 1,000 soldiers. This frontline success became possible thanks to the unique tactics and training of the fighters of the 225th Assault Regiment, where, for example, the use of phones in the combat zone is strictly limited. This prevented the Russians from tracking the movement of our soldiers. But in another sector, we have a problem. Enemy saboteurs have entered Pokrovsk in the Donetsk region. It was reported that one group was eliminated right here at the intersection of Shevchenka and Defenders of Ukraine streets. This is in the very center, but it's not the outskirts of Pokrovsk either. But from our own sources, we've learned that there were several groups, and they scattered somewhere around the Yuvaleny Park area and in the private sector. The problem is that there simply aren't enough infantry in the Pokrovsk area, and that's exactly why the enemy was able to slip through. This week, the Regional Military Administration announced a mandatory evacuation from Dobrapilya and 9 other settlements near Pokrovsk. Meanwhile, Andriy Tsaplienko worked with the drone forces and tried to figure out whether robots can replace people here to hold the defensive line. And in this episode, we're helping the 15th Mobile Border Detachment, Steel Border. Its fighters are currently repelling the occupiers in the Kursk direction and defending the Sumy region. And for our border to remain as strong as steel, the soldiers need a ground drone that can not only deliver everything necessary to the positions, but also help evacuate the wounded. And your 10, 20, or even 100 hryvnias via this QR code is a chance to push back the enemy and save our people's lives. Thank you to everyone who joins in.
A Russian FPV drone is standing on the road, waiting for its prey, a Ukrainian vehicle. Our soldiers call such traps by the Russian word zdun. Fortunately, the zdun was spotted by a Ukrainian drone. One drone destroys another. The war of robots is already a reality. This is a typical situation for the defenders in the Pokrovsk area, where the enemy is trying to establish an impassable kill zone and cut off logistics.
They're hitting our logistics. It's just brutal.
The enemy has advanced to the center of the village of Novoeconomic, northeast of Murad. This means that the logistics corridor along the Kostiantynivka-Pokrovsk highway has already been lost. There are only 2 roads left to the strategically important city, one from the direction of Pavlohrad and another through the village of Rodinsk. But both are under constant artillery fire and drone strikes.
Fire!
The 59th Brigade is holding the defense in the Pokrovsk area. This unit of unmanned systems forces also has its own assault infantry. They are stationed where sometimes only ground drones can reach the position.
The enemy has cut off our logistics in this sector. That is, right now it's very difficult to get in by armored personnel carrier or by pickup truck. On our section, robotic systems are the top priority.
Back at the beginning of the year, in the Da Vinci Wolves Battalion, which became part of the 59th, it became clear that ground robots allow people to survive in places where survival would seem impossible. This is how a wheeled drone delivers food, ammunition, and medicine to the guys literally right under the enemy's nose. Because the Russians are, without exaggeration, sitting in the house next door. Now the battalion has a whole arsenal of unmanned vehicles for different tasks.
This one here is the termite. It can carry up to 400 kilograms. It can operate several times in one night.
Its main tasks are logistics and evacuating the wounded.
To pull out just one wounded person, you need at least 4 people. But this way, the work gets a lot easier. It makes things easier because you don't need 4 people. This already guarantees safety for the people. Another advantage is that it works faster than a group of people would.
Drones are also used to evacuate the fallen. Here's one of those missions. An assault group is requesting the evacuation of a hero's body who died on the front line. The Termit drone is trying to retrieve him. During the evacuation, several enemy FPVs target the ground drone. The robot withstands the hits. If the fallen soldier's comrades had tried to carry him out, there would have been even more casualties. This guy, the UGV operator, had his own drone save his life during a logistics operation.
You could say the Termit bought my life. A Russian FPV attack starts on us. I see an FPV, and it's flying straight at me, not at the Termit, but at me. They're already shouting at me, like, run! I hear the FPV stop in front of the tree line, turn around, and fly toward the Termit.
The operator, whose robot shielded him, is only 21 years old.
My advantage is UAVs and strike UGVs.
Strike ground robotic systems here, in the Pokrovsk area, have stopped several assaults.
At that moment, the enemy was carrying out assault actions, and basically, they were successful. We were working against the enemy from a neighboring tree line. We were given the task to take down the enemy.
Let's put it this way. During our shift at this position, we killed 4 enemy soldiers specifically with the turret.
We took out 2 people right away, pinned 2 more to the ground, and then hit them with their own FPV.
And this is a kamikaze platform. Usually, it delivers an anti-tank mine one way. An experienced operator can easily drive robots of this type into the enemy's shelter.
Now, there we go, and detonation.
But such robots haven't become a mass weapon yet. The main job for ground-based unmanned systems is logistics. But hoping that, with a shortage of people, robots are holding the front line near Pokrovsk is pointless.
Let me be honest with you. At this stage, logistics is like a knee that's needed for the front line. At the moment, it can't hold a section or somehow reinforce it.
Here, near Pokrovsk, the war is changing very quickly. Drones that were effective just yesterday suddenly lose their relevance today. This primarily concerns aerial drones, says the deputy commander of the 59th.
For me, this tool works well, but for the neighboring unit, say 3 brigades up, this tool doesn't work there.
Why is that?
Technical conditions, radio frequencies, where the enemy. Well, for example, right now our situation is like this. Certain frequencies are working. On another section of the front, they might not work at all.
What to do is a critical question, especially when sometimes only drones can stop the enemy. The deputy brigade commander's solution is simple. Those who know their section of the front should be given the opportunity to purchase drones themselves.
Decentralization, meaning that a military unit should have the right, have free funds, and be able to say, we are ready to take responsibility for a specific piece of equipment.
Moreover, the brigade command officer believes that this way there's a chance to curb the unjustifiably high financial appetites of some manufacturers, and therefore increase the number of drones.
The 10th FPV, yeah, the 10th frame is, well, yeah, the frame is the same, just the 10th one, with the 10-kilometer spool on it. One supplier sells it for 48, 47, and another one for 30. So it's not the same thing. I don't even know what could justify artificially raising the price like that. Based on what? Some kind of technical solution? No, they're identical.
From a financial perspective, it looks like looting during wartime. In other words, people are making money and profiting off the war without actually thinking about the outcome, about victory, about how limited our resources are. The defense of Pokrovsk shows that a turning point is coming in the war. To withstand it, both those holding the front and those supplying the ammunition need to adapt quickly. Andriy Tsaplienko, Alexei Osivchuk, Serhiy Perifilov, TSN. Tisden, 1+1, Marathon, United News.
And this week once again showed that Ukrainians are ready to keep fighting for justice and the right to live with dignity. And in recent years, another generation has emerged, one that refuses to stay silent. Kyiv, Lviv, Dnipro, Odessa, and dozens of our other cities. Thousands of people, mostly young, for the first time in 3 years of full-scale war, took to the squares in peaceful protest. And not just against the bill that limited the independence of agencies created specifically to fight corruption, NABU and SAP. People were no less outraged by the way this law was passed, urgently, literally in one day, at a specially convened session. Such things happen with the Verkhovna Rada extremely rarely. How did the MPs themselves, the Prosecutor General, the SBU, NABU, and SAP, and ultimately President Zelensky explain this turbo mode? Have the mistakes been corrected, and what lessons have the authorities and civil society in Ukraine learned for themselves? Our Irina Prokofieva with an interim summary.
The source of power in Ukraine is the people, with placards. The opinions are formulated briefly and to the point. A generation that grew up on social media suddenly showed up offline. The protest is peaceful but emotional. Kyiv, Lviv, Odessa, Dnipro. For the first time in 3.5 years of war, people came out in 20 cities across Ukraine. Ukrainians say, "Our parents are fighting on the front line." But here, in the rear, no one is planning to lose the battle for values.
12-4-14. To hell with it.
1-24-14. That's the reason people took to the streets. That's the number of the law that hardly anyone has read, not even the deputies who voted for it. But what was surprising wasn't even what they passed, but how they did it. From making amendments in committee to a non-core bill to the president's signature, only 16 hours passed. Even the old-timers in parliament can't recall such lightning-fast speed. And that's a clear signal to society. Something's not right. It was supposed to be an extraordinary, but otherwise routine, session of the Verkhovna Rada to consider law number 12414. Behind the long title lies a noble goal, to help the families of missing soldiers. But suddenly, during the vote, amendments from Maxim Vishansky are put forward, which had nothing to do with these families at all. According to them, the Special Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office de facto comes under the control of the Prosecutor General's office, and it gains indirect influence over NABU. The Prosecutor General himself received the right to take cases away from anti-corruption agencies, transfer investigations to others, or even close cases altogether. Neither blocking the podium nor shouting in the session hall could stop the lightning-fast passage of the law.
263 in favor. The decision is adopted.
At that very moment, on the other side of the city, the heads of NABU and SAP, Seaman Krivonos and Alexander Klemenko, come out with a statement.
There were two main elements of independence: the absence of any political influence and exclusive jurisdiction. And these two elements of independence are essentially lost with this bill.
This bill introduces amendments to the Criminal Procedure Code. It grants broad powers to the Prosecutor General of Ukraine.
The independence of anti-corruption bodies is a pitfall that the Ukrainian authorities keep stepping on. And this applies to all authorities throughout the entire period of independence. Every time a body gained access to high-ranking officials, it started to displease the country's leadership. The previous battle was over the High Anti-Corruption Court, which, unlike Poroshenko, Zelensky actually established. But now he himself has found himself in the same situation, because the anti-corruption system is one of the requirements for our accession to the EU. They were created in exchange for visa-free travel and remain its guarantor. This was immediately reminded not only by the people on the streets, but also by European politicians. They issued a series of restrained, but very clear warnings that money, international support, and integration into the European Union are things that will go to a Ukraine committed to democracy. The European Commissioner for Enlargement, Marta Kos, openly warned that the EU will not tolerate any backsliding on the rule of law and the values of the European Union. The ambassadors of the G7 countries expressed their concern, and the German Foreign Minister, Johann Wadefuhl, stated directly that the adopted law would become an obstacle to Ukraine's EU membership. Credit where it's due. The president's office responded almost immediately. Of course, a presidential veto on the questionable law would have been a quicker solution. But even this situation has its upsides. The president calls the security officials to his office and is surprised to learn that some of them are seeing each other in person for the first time in a long while. This tension between law enforcement agencies was also noticed by the public. The complaints voiced by the newly appointed Prosecutor General boiled down to the inefficiency of NABU and SAP, saying that cases are investigated for years, rarely make it to court, and even the integrity of the detectives themselves is questionable.
Pay attention to those criminal proceedings that have been under investigation for a long time, namely 1, 2, 3 years or more, without any procedural decision being made.
Vasyl Maliuk, the head of the SBU, was more emotional at that same briefing. He saw an abundance of Russian moles in the independent anti-corruption infrastructure. The day before, his special agents detained the head of one of NABU's interregional departments, Ruslan Magomadrasulov. And the suspicion against this ethnic Dagestani is business in Russia.
This is the height of audacity. You know, in a Halyuka accent, I'm not keeping you all for Sunday. I'll finish all of you. You'll all be singing Once Upon a Time There Lived. Sorry, I'm quoting here, but I have to convey this to you so you fully understand what kind of specialist this is.
To be fair, the effectiveness of the anti-corruption infrastructure in Ukraine really is limping on both legs. Here's an independent report from the European Commission, published on the NABU website. Last year, the Bureau received a score of 1.4. A good performance starts at 2 points, with 3 being the maximum. So 1.4 doesn't mean disaster. But you can't really call it a success either.
And in the last report, by the way, in almost all the chapters that are supposed to be negotiated with Ukraine, including those that cover anti-corruption and rule of law issues, it was stated that Ukraine has moderate but still positive progress.
The law that was passed, in Europe's view, would have put an end even to this moderate progress. That's why Volodymyr Zelensky promised to resolve the issue with a special emergency law.
I will propose to the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine a comprehensive bill that will be the definitive answer, one that will truly ensure robust strength within the entire law enforcement system, and there will be absolutely no Russian influence whatsoever at any point. All the provisions for the independence of anti-corruption institutions.
On Thursday evening, the president's bill was indeed registered in the Verkhovna Rada. The vote was scheduled for another week. The only question left is, will there be enough votes for it? Old Vasilevska-Smaliak, a deputy from Servant of the People, is not sure about this yet. She herself did not support the controversial amendments. The problem now might be a parliamentary crisis. The deputies are demotivated to vote on anything further. We just need to look more closely at what we're voting for. During the week, when the deputies were already planning to take a break, the presidential faction will try to gather votes for the new law. It won't be easy to do this. There are also people under NABU investigation present in the session hall. The street is clearly getting ready to push them toward making the right decision as well. Organizers are calling for a mass protest with placards on the eve of the vote, and the deputies won't be able to ignore them anymore. So, lessons from cardboard protests. Let's start with the main characters, NABU and SAP, who have felt the strength and energy of the protest behind them and, it seems, have spread their wings. They need to understand, this same youth will hold them 3 times more accountable. Anti-corruption bodies are now under the microscope. Members of parliament, who are mentioned and whose voting records were scrutinized, also have to pass a maturity test. Zelensky, who for the first time experienced the power of civil society, has made it clear. He hears what is being demanded of him and is ready to act as a democrat, even when war requires restricting freedoms. But as for Russia, which tried to use the protest in its propaganda, it suddenly fell silent because it saw the dictator's worst nightmare, a Ukrainian youth out on the streets, untouched by law enforcement. The new generation has the same DNA, a mature society that instantly unites when facing the abyss and chants, "You can't treat us like this." Not even their own people, let alone outsiders. That's exactly why Putin hates Ukraine. Irina Prokoyeva, Alina Hashchik, Maria Vasilieva, Andriy Vidishkin, Denis Yaroshenko, TSN, Week 1 plus, one marathon United News.
The country will be watching the vote on the presidential bill to restore the independence of Nabu and Sapo especially closely, because so far we are already seeing a reduction in aid from the European Union. The fourth tranche under the EU's Ukraine Facility program in 2025 will be reduced due to 3 unfulfilled reforms. Instead of the planned $4.5 billion, Ukraine will receive a little over 3. According to the European Commission spokesperson, the authorities have indeed implemented 13 planned reforms, while of the 3 remaining, one concerns decentralization, another relates to the law on ARMA reform, and the third is directly about fighting corruption, specifically the selection of judges for the High Anti-Corruption Court. This week as well, another 250 of our defenders were freed from Russian captivity, members of the armed forces of Ukraine, border guards, the National Guard, the National Police, including not only soldiers and sergeants, but also several officers. Many of them had spent more than 3 years in Russian torture chambers. Almost all of them are seriously ill and severely wounded. They defended Ukraine on the Donetsk, Zaporizhia, Luhansk, Kherson, Kharkiv, Sumy, and Chernihiv fronts. The last defender of Zminy Island, a fighter of the State Border Guard Service, has also returned. The youngest of the released soldiers is 27 years old. The oldest is 66. After the first hugs on their native soil and the joyful tears of their loved ones, the soldiers now urgently need medical and psychological assistance. And this was already the 9th stage of the exchange, which was agreed upon in May in Istanbul. In total, since then, more than 1,000 defenders of Ukraine have been brought back, President Zelensky reported. And although the Russians continue to manipulate the lists and refuse to return those whom Ukraine is especially waiting for, particularly the Azov fighters, these exchanges are practically the only result of negotiations between the Ukrainian and Russian delegations. Another such meeting in Istanbul took place this week. And most importantly, they managed to reach an agreement on exchanging another 1,200 prisoners of war and returning political prisoners and journalists. According to Zelensky, it took a long time to get to this point. Civilians are not exchanged. They should simply be released. That's why, he says, they're now looking for a format for the lists from both our side and theirs. The intrigue is also growing around a possible meeting between Zelensky and Putin. Ukraine has proposed to hold it by the end of the summer with the participation of the American and Turkish presidents. Only such a high level, they believe in Kyiv, can bring concrete progress. Interestingly, before Istanbul, our delegation met with Turkish President Erdogan, and he is already shifting his role from arbiter to active player, as he promised to call both Putin and Trump about a possible joint meeting in Turkey. And although the Kremlin officially denies the possibility of a meeting between the presidents before all issues are agreed upon by the delegations, Volodymyr Zelensky says that Russia itself is already raising the topic of his communication with Putin. Well, President Trump added fuel to the intrigue and, when asked by journalists, said, "The meeting will take place, but it should have happened 3 months ago." And he didn't specify any details. And here's yet another sign that the consequences of their criminal war are catching up with the Russians. In the Federation Council of the Russian Federation, they've already started talking about the strictest budget cuts for next year. And of course, the savings won't come from the military, but from civilian expenditures. They plan to cut them by at least 2 trillion rubles because the sanctions are working, oil prices are falling, and not even their rainy day stash, the National Welfare Fund, can save the hole in the budget. Well, and to help Russians come to their senses faster and realize that starting wars is bad for everyone, our trusty drones are lending a hand, precisely and deliberately reducing the power of the monster that works for the killers. Oksana Radionova on this week's successful operations.
This is the resort city of Sochi. For the first time since the start of the full-scale war, Ukrainian drones, similar to the Lyet UAVs, have added special effects to the vacation package. But it seems these effects weren't much appreciated by the Russian vacationers, and even less so by the locals.
Why are they bombing Sochi? They should be bombing Russia.
So what? Sochi isn't Russia. This question has already become a meme, just like the next one. Where is the Russian air defense?
Maybe they've run out of missiles. All in one spot over there.
But it's even worse where the air defense is actually working. They fired at the drones so hard that they ended up blowing up a residential building with their own S-400 missile. The main target of the Ukrainian attack was the oil depot at Sochi International Airport, 550 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. thousands of cancelled flights at Russian airports were compounded by a new transportation collapse. Drones have pinpointed key railway junctions vital to the occupying army. These are the logistical arteries that feed Russia's war machine. If you cut them off, supplies to the front come to a halt.
But where's the stone?
Through Kamny, full name Kamenolomny Station, the Russian army transfers equipment, weapons, fuel, and soldiers to the front. Good drones smashed not only the station building itself, but also the control room and the networks. As a result, almost 150 trains didn't reach their destinations on time, which undermines their offensive. And this is another station, Lykaya. It's actually been in trouble since the days of the ATO. In fact, a significant part of the supplies for the Donetsk and Luhansk fronts comes from here. Our defenders also attacked the railway logistics hub in Novocherkassk. Last night, a substation that powers the railway in the Oktyabrski district exploded in the Volgograd region. Civilian air traffic is being blocked by drones. We're actively attacking the railways. There are changes happening in Russian ports as well. Starting this week, all foreign vessels there have been ordered to be inspected by FSB officers, which adds more problems for Russia's war economy. We continue the painful tactic of 100 cuts for the enemy. It was our forces, using two types of drones, these mini Shahids and these tailed UAVs, that struck the signal substation radio factory in Stavropol. This facility is key for electronic warfare systems in aviation and air defense, as well as for weapon guidance systems. And this is how the nitrogen plant in Stavropol Krai, a producer of raw materials for explosives, specifically nitric acid and ammonium nitrate, went up in flames. Drones also paid a visit to the Tambov gunpowder plant. Here, the Russians manufacture gunpowder for both firearms and rockets. A series of powerful explosions rocked occupied Donetsk and Makiivka. There was a major strike in the area of the Zasyako mine. At least 8 hits targeted the occupiers' base and the railway infrastructure. Ammunition was burning near occupied Melitopol. This week, our military intelligence reported that a Su-27 combat training fighter jet caught fire at the Armavir airfield in Krasnodar Krai. They hinted it was the work of partisans. And there's more to come. Oksana Radionova, Natalka Kucherenko, TSN Week, 1+1, Marathon, United News.